All right, welcome folks. So I'm Sandy, I'm the product manager for Parent Gauge. Really excited to hear your feedback today. And while you're logging in and settling down, a couple housekeeping items. As you're joining, you'll notice you're in mute, but this is an interactive session. So feel free to introduce yourselves in that chat. And throughout the session, feel free to chime in. We'll have some questions for you along the way. We'll also have some time at the end to respond to questions too. So if you have any burning questions that don't come up during the session, feel free to save those for the end. And with that said, welcome. This is the last episode in our series on family engagement in the trenches. Today is all about interviews. If you missed any prior sessions, this recording, as well as the previous two, are available on the NHSA site. So you'll have access to that as well. And with that said, turning it over to Lucretia.
Hi there, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depending upon where you're coming from. We are very excited today for this interview section. I have three wonderful people with us, and I can't say enough about how great they've been helping me put this together. We have Jesse Hickson and Scott Sykes. Here's his picture. He is a coach and mentor for Leeds Head Start and Early Head Start. And then next is Jessie, and she is also a coach and mentor with Leeds Head Start and Early Head Start. And then we have Miss Sherry Day. And Sherry Day is our family service worker from Leeds as well. So the whole point of this is that all three of them, even though they're from Leeds, they may see how they do their own interviews a little different. So we're going to have a great question time to ask them about their interviews and see what answers they have. But when we ask the question, if you have something you'd like to share, please put it in the chat. We want to see it too. And we'd also like for you to ask any questions that you have so that we can answer those for you. So let's go ahead and let's get started with our very first question. And this question is for Sherry. Sherry, how often are you doing your interviews and surveys?
So hello, everyone. And we do interviews and surveys 2 times a year. We chose 2 times a year based on how we kind of see family data changes. We know that there's not, and when we're looking at the end game to family outcomes, sometimes doing multiple surveys, families don't have changes within short periods of time. Takes a little bit longer to see change and growth and families to develop over time. So we do 2 surveys. We do one in the fall. We also do one in the spring, and we have sort of like deadlines, if you will, for those, but it's not really a deadline like you got to check the box and get it done. It's a deadline that we align more with the data collection point so that we can collect data, that we can assure that families have been able to participate in the interview or survey if as they want to. And we align those data connection points the 2 times a year with our data collection and our baseline school readiness data, and then the end of the year school readiness data. So everyone's pulling information from families and children outcomes during those 2 times a year.
Awesome. Okay. Jessie, how do you space out your interviews in an interview season?
So I personally try to do like 1 to 2 interviews a day if possible, which would give me anywhere between 8 and 10 interviews a week. And that allows me to get several done in a short period of time, but while also making sure that I have the time to be attentive to the family. And if they need resources or any kind of referrals in that time, I can make sure that, I'm attentive to that as well.
Awesome. Scott, how about you?
Actually, mine is very similar to Jesse's. I try to do about 1 to 2 interviews a day when I have them, and basically, I don't want to overdo them because I know I have to do transcriptions as well, and I also want to be attentive to the families, just as Jesse said.
Okay, cool. All right, well, Scott, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is question number 3. How do you as a group prepare for your interview season?
Well, with the last interviews I did, I relied heavily on the family service workers, especially their experience, being a little more new at the time. And I would get together, discuss about families' personalities, how to do interviews properly, any form of advice, making sure that I'm prepared, I have everything I need, all my tools. And basically anything that would help me perform a survey to the best benefit of the family.
Cool. All right. Well, let me ask Jesse then first for the next question. Question 4. And you had brought this up, Scott, but what tools have you found helpful doing the interviews? What kind of tools are you guys using, Jesse?
So the 2 main things that I use is we actually have a visual rating scale that I set in front of each of my families anytime we sit down and have a discussion, so that they can kind of, not only hear me ask what their options are, but they can see it.
Yeah.
And that also gives them a couple of different options as to how to answer. So they can give me the words, the not very much or somewhat. But I've also had some families that have used number scales, like a 1 through 5. And I've actually had some families do it based on the color because it's color coded. So that's a really cool tool that I like to use. And I like to give the families the options of how they want to answer it. And I also I have a little pocket recorder that stays in my office, and I take that with me. And I use that. That way I'm paying attention to what they're saying, not trying to type while they're speaking to me.
Nice.
So I can hear what they're saying and give them, feedback.
Sherry, any other additional tools that you like to use?
Yeah, I'd just like to say too that we have made sure that our family services team is equipped with the technology they need for that we would need for the interviews, because we use the Parent Gauge interview and survey to its full capacity and to fidelity. So in saying that, we assure that we have laptops that are recording capable, that has recording capabilities. Jesse mentioned the recorders that we can use if we're not taking in a laptop. We can record the interview with a recorder. Also printed copies, assuring that we have the printed copies of the assessment in case something happens with technology, because you have the best interest when you go into a home, and we do majority of our interviews are done in the home, but you can get there and think that you got the best setup in the world, and then things happen with technology and internet and all that kind of stuff, and so then we're back to kind of like that hard copy thing. So we do make sure that we're equipped with hard copies. And then we also, another way that we prepare as a group, we actually have multiple cohort meetings. So we're always talking about the interview and what is working for the families, what's working for us, how we can, use each other, as Scott said, as a resource to fully develop and implement the interviews and assure that we all have everything that we need for the interview.
Right. Great. How about you, Scott? Any particular tools?
Honestly, they hit the nail
They
right
hit
on
them
the
all.
head. Especially Jesse, because the first 2 I was going to mention was the visual scale and my recorder, but, she got it down right there. So I really can't think of anything else. They really have defined all the tools, having a hard copy, using your laptop. I don't know if other other Head Start areas have, what we're hoping to get is hotspot tools, basically jetpacks. Because one of the things I found is some people do not like to ask to use internet service of a parent or a family.
Yeah,
And so having those would really help if you have them.
right. And so, but if you got that, then that's when y'all go to the recorder.
Yeah.
So that you record. Got it. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. And Scott, I'm going to keep you right there in the hot seat.
Okay.
And how do you handle difficult interviews, Scott?
Okay, well, for me, the difficult interviews, I have to keep in mind, this is a survey to help families. And sometimes it is difficult because one of the things that I've even discussed with other FSWs is language, how you approach it. Like for me, I have to be relaxed. I have to try and like read it so I'm not rushing.
Mhm.
So I make sure that it's a smooth interview. And I want the family that I'm interviewing and surveying to be relaxed. So the more relaxed I am, that's how I handle my difficult interviews. I don't push for answers. I don't deviate from the script. I keep right on there. And if they say, I don't have an answer for that, I'll say, that's fine. You don't have to. And we go on to the next question.
Awesome. How about you, Jesse? How do you handle difficult interviews?
So
Any tips or
similar in the
tricks?
sense that I do like to start before I, move into the interview, just kind of explaining to the family, we're just having a conversation. I just want feedback about our program. I'm not fishing for any particular answers. I also, there are some families that have been a little bit resistant to sitting down with me, which is okay. And I let them know that I would love to hear their feedback and I would love to know what they think. However, I'm not going to require it. I'm not going to force it on them.
Right.
So I also, I do give them that option if they're really not wanting to do it.
Okay. Sherry, what have you got for us, Miss Sherry?
Yeah, I just want to add to something that Jesse said and kind of bounce off of that. Sometimes, we do the same thing as adults. It's that fear of the unknown. What's somebody going to ask me? And when we talk to families about, we want to do this interview or we want to do this survey with you and, find out how the program's working for you or so that we can make changes and then also make sure that we're providing the services that families are wanting. It really is that fear of the unknown, because if you go into a situation and you have no clue, it's like, oh my goodness, what are they going to ask me? What do they want from me, kind of thing, right? So those can tend to sometimes turn into difficult interviews or start as a difficult interview. But then once we start having that communication, and I think history and conversation with our families from like interest to application through the first part of the program year and just how are you doing and having those informal and formal conversations with them when it comes to the interview process and even announcing that it's time for our interview or our assessment with you, then I feel like it's more receptive. And it's not viewed or we don't have to handle it as a difficult interview because history and conversation can be so rich.
Right.
Yeah, it really does help to ease the process and that fear of, again, the unknown of, oh my heavens, what are they going to ask me now? Right. So yeah. What do they want from me now? That kind of thing.
Now, don't forget, y'all, put how do you guys deal with difficult interviews? Put those in the chat. We want to know. And any questions, put those in the chat as well. And we'll go over them at the end. These questions kind of go pretty fast, but I know that there's a lot of questions coming through. So that's awesome. This is what we're here for. Okay, let's go ahead and go to question 6. Sherry, I'll keep you sitting right there. We're going to hit you up with this one. What's the best way to make your assessments more like a conversation?
Ultimately, for me, it's to know the questions, to be very familiar with the interview questions, to be comfortable with them. We've done a little bit of role playing between ourselves, just especially when we first started the Parent Gauge interview questionnaire, just to make sure that we know the questions, we know what we're wanting from families, we know how we can be comfortable in asking them, and then to know our families. Like, again, that's where the history and conversation comes in. So if you know the questions, if you know your families, if you can draw from previous experiences and conversations with them, and I feel like that helps to make their potential level of engagement even that much greater in the conversation. And also it's a matter of comfortability, if you will. They choose their environment. We like I said, we mentioned in the beginning that we like to do our family assessments, interviews, goal setting processes, engaging families more in their home, because typically that's where we think that people are most comfortable, is in their home. But that's not some families. They're more uncomfortable having people in their home that they're not used to having in there. So it's a matter of then comfortability too for the families, and allowing them to lead and guide the location, sometimes the conversation and things like that. So yeah.
Cool. Scott, let's go to you.
Okay.
Tell us.
I like what Sherry said about knowing the survey. That's one thing that's helped me to make it a conversation, is that I understand the survey, so I'm able to ask the questions in a way, in a tone that make it seem like they're not being graded, they're not being judged. They understand that this is more there, and they can talk about, even after they answer a question, even if it's a closed-ended question, they can talk more and elaborate more if they want to on the interview, and say, oh, you know what, that reminds me of this time. Do you establish time to read with your child? And they talk about how, oh, I read this book the other day, and it just becomes a natural conversation. And so the questions seem to flow, as opposed to just kind of making it, okay, I just need an answer here, an answer there. And it's more like, and then they get comfortable with the interview, and then they're more open and honest with you, which I like.
Yeah. How about you, Jesse?
Well, I feel like I have a slight advantage over Sherry and Scott, in the sense that I'm center-based. And so I see my families all the time. And so when they come in the morning to drop off, or they come in the afternoon to pick up, I am there in the hallways or in the classrooms, and I'm having conversations with them all the time.
Yeah.
And so when it comes time to sit down and do our parent gauge, and I bring it up to them, and I'm like, hey, by the way, guys, it's time to do our parent gauge, really, really, really want your feedback. And we, I'm loud and goofy and silly anyways. So most of our parents are drawn to me anyways, because so, they're used to seeing me, they're used to talking to me all the time. So for them to sit down with me for this is really simple. It's just more of me digging a little bit deeper into, how are you doing? What do you need? Kind of thing, more than just our day-to-day.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Stay there. Jesse, you're going to answer the next question first. I'm trying to keep you all in a round.
Yeah.
Okay. Jesse, do you find that the location of, and you guys have been talking about this already. So if you've already answered, you just want to say yes, that's fine. But do you find that the location of the interviews can make a difference in the overall conversation? And if so, let me just throw this in there, since you guys have already answered that. What are some alternatives that you have used, if not in the home, since that's your particular way of doing it?
It absolutely makes a difference, because our parents need to be able to be comfortable when they sit down with us. So obviously we want to do it in the home, if the parent is okay with us being in the home.
Right.
However, I've had a couple of parents who would prefer to sit in my office.
Okay.
I'm already here dropping Johnny off. Can I just come in when I'm done? We've had parents meet us at our local library. We've had parents meet us, provided we have nice weather. We go sit down at a park,
Awesome.
and go to a shelter house and sit down at the park and have our conversation. So I leave it up to the parent. What are you comfortable with? Where would you like to sit down with me?
Great. What about you, Scott? Do you ever come across where you're doing it outside of the home in a different environment?
Yes, actually, there are times where one parent, she wanted to meet close to the local library. She just went outside. She didn't want to do it in her home. And, because the whole idea with the parent gauge, they say, well, we want it in the home because it's more comfortable for the family. But as Jesse said, that's not necessarily 100%.
Right.
Eventually some families are like, no, we'd rather you not. And we like to make them as comfortable as possible to have a very strong interview. So sometimes we can't get in the home. So, but it does make a difference. I mean, those are comfortable in the home because there is a double factor where when you are able to enter their home, you get to observe how they're living, which might help the interview too if they're experiencing any issues.
Right. Right. It allows you to see the other things outside of family engagement, such as heat and food and shelter being okay. Right. Got it. How about you, Miss Sherry?
Yeah, it's again, absolutely. It's just a matter, as I already said, it's a matter of comfortability. And as we allow families to drive our calendars, if you will, when it comes to scheduling and things like that, it's the same for location. We allow them to drive, of where they want to complete the interview process at. So again, it's a matter of how much do we want to get out of them? How engaged do we want them to be? So it definitely makes a difference in location.
Got it. I'm seeing some great things flying by on the chat as we're talking. Keep it up, guys. We want to know your questions. We want to hear what you have to say about these questions. Appreciate it. Question 8, we are ready for. And I'm just going to ask Jesse this one because it's a program related question, but how are you included in the sharing of the final outcomes of the reports? Because after they're all compiled, how do you get to see it? What happens?
So after we complete our interviews with the families and we print off that final end of the year report for each family, what I like to do is, again, sit down with the family. And a lot of times that might just be in my office after we drop Johnny off. And just sit down and look at the report and, maybe even look at specific questions. Hey, I noticed in the fall you answered this question, with a 2, but in, the spring you answered it with a 4. What made that difference? Or, on this question, it was a 2 here, but it was a 1 here. What can we do differently that we could have helped that? And again, just sit down and have that conversation with that family about, where they're at and where they've been.
That's awesome. Sherry, what about you for the, do you guys have a certain setup where you go over reports together as a group?
Because this is our 3rd year into Parent Gauge, so we really have learned through the years. For the first year was just kind of like we were in it, we were interviewing, we were seeing what we could potentially get, and then how can we use this data as a program, not only, which I do have to say, using this information with families and looking at growth and strengths and things like that is absolutely amazing. That just touches my heart more than anything. But then being able to look and use the information that we've obtained for program planning and outcomes and things like that is just great. So using it with the education staff, maybe identifying some patterns or identifying groups of parents who may be struggling in a particular area based on their answers of the interview is great. And then at the management level, so pulling together, like I said, we align our data collection points with school readiness. So being able to look at child outcomes and look at family outcomes at the same time. And then it's like, wow, look where this child is or this group of children, and look at the outcomes from the family though. Now we understand, we get that bigger picture. So it truly is absolute, the interview, it's just amazing what the outcomes in the interview process can do from the bottom line of actually sharing family data with families to make a difference, to draw and set goals with and things like that, clear up to program planning changes. And is our data from Parent Gauge interviews telling us something then about groups of children or families in a particular classroom or a home-based setting and things like that? So lots of good stuff that we have discovered. The discoveries have been great through the years, and it's been more and more every year. Like, we're learning to use it differently, and how can we just like, where else can we go, right? Yeah,
Right. I just want to point out that Leeds does use Parent Gauge, but as far as interviewing, that's all assessments. So everybody, even if you're not using Parent Gauge, all this information is still very vital for you all. But if you want to learn more about Parent Gauge, we'll be glad to help you with that.
absolutely.
Scott, for you, I also want to know, when they share the final outcomes and you see like on a broad scale of how your program is doing, are you included in that? Do you get included on the broad scale as well as just the families that you've interviewed?
Actually, well, and one of the things I'm kind of excited about is we're starting our post interviews, and one of the features of Parent Gauge is it does comparative reports of growth from initial to post. And this is my first full year of Parent Gauge, so I'm really excited to see how we've grown positively, hopefully positively, and and see where we've gone with our families and what we have done. And that's going to show in those reports, and I'm really excited to see what happens with them.
Awesome, great. Okay, question 8. We're on question 9. We're getting close, guys. Scott, I'm gonna keep you over the coals. What would you say is the hardest part of doing assessments, and how do you overcome that?
For me, the hardest part of an assessment is when a family or the parents are having trouble answering the questions. I have the temptation to deviate from script and say, well, let me elaborate more. Let me ask you some questions. If I do that, I invalidate the data. So I have to keep myself in check and understand that not all the time I'm going to get an answer. But because it's for me, I want to be inquisitive. I want to know more about them. So I'm going to be like, hey, what about this? Let me ask you more open-ended questions. Let me figure this out. But part of the structure of the interview is not to do that.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's an awesome answer. Jesse, how about you? What's the hardest part of doing the assessments, and how do you overcome it?
For me, I feel like sometimes when I am sitting down with a lower functioning family, and they have a difficult time kind of understanding how the question is worded or what we're asking, I might need to look at what they need and be able to word it in a way that they understand what it is I'm looking for without changing the question or changing what we're looking for. So the first few times were a little difficult. But, kind of going back to what we said when we started is, really being able to know and understand the questions in Parent Gauge has made a huge difference in me being able to kind of re-ask.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a chance of, if you ask the question a certain way, of getting a certain response
Mhm.
It's almost pushing them towards a certain response
Mhm.
instead of getting their actual response.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You guys find that? Sherry, how about you? Do you find that
Yeah.
sometimes that can
Yeah, we
happen?
do. Sometimes we have had several discussions over the past couple years about families, if they don't understand a particular word, with the language in it or something like, how has the program, I come up with a word and then it
Affected.
Yeah.
what is it, Jesse?
Affected.
Affected.
Affected, yeah.
Like, how has the program affected? And sometimes families may not understand, like, well, what do you mean? How has the program affected what I do with my child, or whatever the question might be? So it's those kind of word and things like that we talk about as a team of how can we ask the question without skewing an answer or leading
Right.
a family in a particular way. One of the other things I think that I've heard our other team members talk about, maybe the hardest thing, and I don't know if it would be the hardest thing, kind of is the word in there, but it's a little time consuming sometimes for them. We've had to have several discussions around, because we are recording and then we come back and transcribe. Like, it can be time consuming to transcribe, but keeping in mind, what is the purpose of that? Again, like Jesse said in the beginning of the session, a matter of being able to focus on our families without constantly taking notes, and giving them maybe an idea of they're not really listening to me. So that's one of the main reasons that we transcribe. But we've had to kind of come up with a system of, if it's a parent that when you would transcribe one open-ended question and it's going to be 3 pages long, like, we got to kind of pick and choose and maybe do some bulleted lists or something like that, because that's not the purpose of the transcription, is to capture every single word. But we do want to honor the family's words and the way that they're sharing things, and not,
Right.
and that for those things not to be up for interpretation to us. Right. So there is huge benefit in the recording and transcribing, but that also can cause maybe a little bit of time management issue for our family service workers if they have a chatty family, if you will. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Sherry, last question, and absolutely my favorite. I can't wait for your guys' answers, and I want to hear them in the chat too. For you, what is the most rewarding part?
I have to share, just being a part of families' lives for me. If you know anything about me, you're going to know that even right now, even though you can't tell, hopefully, that my eyes are just full of about to, like, I'm getting ready to drip all over my shirt, just because having the privilege to work with our families and use this interview to gather information and allow them to share their strengths and things like that with us. It just runs so deep in my heart, because I'm going to share something personal then of why Head Start means so much to me. That I was a Head Start child in the 60s. I was a Head Start mom in the 90s. Same program, same community that I've been employed in for more than 31 years now. And my grandchildren, because of things like this, assessments and continuing to work and build things that work in the Head Start community, my grandchildren will only live with my Head Start values and mission of my own, because Head Start has worked. My grandchildren will never see a Head Start program, the inside of a classroom. So rewarding for me is just having the opportunity to being blessed with the opportunity to work with Head Start families, and especially gathering the information and having Parent Gauge as a tool and a wonderful resource at our fingertips. And I could just go on for another hour, so I'm going to stop right there, but it's just the most rewarding in my heart.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Scott? Trying not to.
Actually, the one thing is to see growth of family. When the family grows and gets better and better,
Yeah.
because one of the things that I've always thought of as with FSWs and even the coach mentor, our jobs is to work ourselves out of a job. We want families to be successful. We want to celebrate
Awesome.
their successes.
Yeah.
So it is actually so because to be able to service them and give them what they need and help them with resources and everything, that is wonderful. But when they grow themselves, it is the most rewarding thing in the world because we help them get there.
Yeah,
And it's just an amazing process. And it's something I like to see more and more.
that's awesome. Thank you. Miss Jessie, how about you?
Well, I guess for me, it's going to be, during that post-interview, well, whether it's during or, sometimes it's after, just hearing the parents tell me about, not only how their children have grown this year, but how they as the parents or they as the family have grown and changed, and, what they have learned and what have we empowered them to do for themselves and be able to move forward, as a family, as themselves. And, it just, I have so many stories, just from the few years that I've done this, but like one of my favorites is I was working with a family from Nepal last year. And, in their culture, I guess is my understanding is that, education is left to the educators. The families aren't involved. And by the time we got to the spring and I sat down with this family, it was a whole different story. They wanted to sit down with the child and do homework, and the child was teaching them more English, and they wanted to volunteer in the classroom. And like my heart almost exploded, and I called Sherry and I was like, I need you to listen to this. And it's just things like that that just makes my whole heart happy.
You guys are making me tear up.
That's great.
We make ourselves tear up when we talk about this in a group. We do. We do.
And I'm seeing some responses in the chat, and they're just hitting me hard too. My goodness, you guys. All right, that is the last of our questions. I'm going to turn it over to Sandy, and she's going to go through the chat and let us know what we got in there.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of really great questions, and I think we'll still have time for a few others if anyone has any questions they want to get more feedback or hear from others about. First question, do you have a process of notification if there is some kind of red flag in the interview or response that needs immediate attention from other staff?
Yeah, I can take this if you want me to. We have had interviews that we've decided, and we've talked about this as a group as well. If at any time, what's a good time that we should maybe stop an interview because of things that families are sharing, discoveries that we're making, again, those red flags that would be going up. So yes, we have stopped interviews to deal with, and that would be one time that we would, is if there are red flags. And, I will share one time we had a mother who was just, she had never really engaged with this particular family service worker before. And then when the family service worker went in to complete her interview, about halfway through, the family service worker didn't stop the recording, but she did stop the interview process to hear the mom out, because she got so comfortable through the interview that she started sharing these things about having like suicidal ideations even. And that was just like, the family service worker was just stunned. She was crushed. She had never heard these things. This was a pretty self-sufficient mom who didn't reach out for a lot of different things. So we have had things that we have stopped to deal with, and family service workers, we talk about those things often, and we allow ourselves the grace to be able to just stop where we are, focus completely on the family, help to meet the needs of the family, and then come back at a later time.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes to show you how much you can get out of these interviews that we're doing.
You really can. We could probably sit and just, if we was to make a bulleted list of all of the different times that family service workers, we've came into our cohort to talk about this, and they're like, wow, the discovery from this mom, or the response from this dad, or, you know, what's happening within this family. And all of the discovery is extremely important, but being able, ultimately, we talk about what's in the best interest of that family at that time. And we're going to do everything that we need to do to make sure that that family's needs are met through the interview. You know, if this has happened through the interview process, to make sure that those families' needs are met above all else. And then we can go back to it later.
Sandy, are there any other questions out there?
Yeah, we have a
Whoa.
couple more. We have like 5 or 6 more. So the next one, this one's a yes or no, really, is do you notify the families that the conversation is being recorded? And I think that one we can pass to the whole group. Yeah.
Yes, yes. We actually also have them sign a form that informs them that they are being recorded, and they have a right to refuse to be recorded. Most families don't, because we explained to them this is for us to be able to record. The reason we record is to be able to get what they say correctly, that we have their undivided attention, that we're paying attention to what they're saying, and we're transcribing later. And usually we don't get a lot of resistance on that, but sometimes people don't want to be recorded, but we inform them.
And we also inform them of it will be deleted within a period of time of that recording. We only give ourselves a certain amount of time to get the interview scribed. Once it's scribed, it's deleted.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And then do y'all usually have a feeling an interview will be difficult before the interview?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look at those laughs. Oh my goodness.
I'll go ahead and start
Yes.
this one. And again, I have a little bit of an advantage over Sherry and Scott, but yes, we definitely have some parents that we know are going to be a little bit trickier than others. Which again, for myself, is why I start having this conversation very early with parents and setting them up for it and letting them know what it is and why we're doing it. And, you know, that does help ease it, at least on my end. Not everybody's a cakewalk. And sometimes I might have to get help from, you know, my fellow family service workers.
Great answer. Okay. And this kind of goes along with that. So it's how do you avoid bias with the staff who knows the families the best being the one to interview them? We see very highly rated responses with certain individuals, even when we expect parents to identify specific challenges with the site.
I feel like that's a part of that is just, so we set our families up that family service workers who initially start with a family in a program, whether that's through application, stays with that family until they're out of the program. And so, but that's a part of sticking to the script, not deviating from what Parent Gauge has laid out for us to do. And again, if we're just listening based on the questions, getting their answers, typing them up, we have to stay focused within that instead of, oh, like, we know what she's going to say, I'm just going to go ahead and, you know, whatever. So it's very careful. You have to do those things very carefully.
Makes sense there. Let's see. How do you use the results from your interview to make program decisions?
I hate to be the one to keep speaking up, but
You get them, Sherry.
So just like I said before, a little while ago, there's a process of, yes, we provide family with data, family outcomes, we compare that to, and we have those data collection points around school readiness, child outcomes, and then we can use that in specific cohorts of education cohorts, and they can look for with their administrators, they can look for things or patterns of for children in the classroom and things, or match up. This is how the child's acting, what's happening in the home. And we look at that parent gauge interview and we're like, wow, that just opened up the world. So from that level, then into the management team, and a matter of, do we need to make changes based on a question or a series of questions that's being asked in parent gauge, and which direction is that taking us in? And we really need to look at our program then, because we may not be offering something in the best way that families actually need programming or supports.
So you'd mean, like, for an example, say health and nutrition, if you're getting lower scores overall on that, then that's what you focus on as to what you need to do for next time.
Absolutely.
Right? Is that how that works?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, I have a follow-up for that. Wasn't in the chat, but I'm gonna throw it out there. But have you been surprised by any results that have come out of those interviews? You know, when we're like in that scenario where there's a nutritional goal that we want to set. Have y'all been surprised by any results and where you've gone because of interview results?
Yes, most definitely. There's a series of questions in the interview that ask parents about how connected they feel to their peers. I can't say the question right off the top of, verbatim, but how they feel connected to their peers, or do they feel
to their community?
Yeah, to their community.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, to where we think, oh, we're having all these engagement activities, family and father, and between classrooms and program options, and we've got all this good stuff going on. And I think it was the second year, it was last year at the end of the year, end of the year program data, I was just shocked, because that was like one of our lowest scoring outcomes.
Wow.
Was that families did not feel connected. And I was like, what? Wait a minute, maybe I read this wrong. Let me go back and read this again. And so it truly like took me off my feet. And I'm like, what do we need to do? And how are we looking at it? Are we interpreting this information the same? Are we defining what are we defining as being connected to their community, right? So just really digging in and defining that and looking at that, but that really caught me off guard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a great discovery.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last question, and everyone feel free to chime in on the chat as well, is do you give parents some sort of tangible tool to track their progress on their goals?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I'll get started.
I was looking at you, Jesse.
So we actually do have NCR forms. So when we sit down with goal setting with families, I have one of these forms out and ready. And, before I even start writing, I'm going to sit down with, what is it that you want to achieve? Where are we going? And we're going to have a discussion around what it is they want. And then from there is where I'll start filling out the form with the parents. I like to sit so they can kind of see what I'm doing and what I'm writing. And, we'll discuss the steps that are taken. And then again, it's an NCR form. So I keep a copy with me in my office. And then I give a copy to the parent to take with them. And then, we touch back, every month, every couple of months, depending on what it is that they're looking for. And I'll have my copy out, and, I encourage them to bring their copy as well, so we can write and make notes and keep track of it.
Love that. Love
Great.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, gang, that was all of the questions we had for today. Any parting words from any of our panelists or hosts today?
Well, I thought this was fun. Thanks.
Well, thank you for having us. I really appreciate it.
You guys were amazing. I have loved doing this series. This has just been fabulous, and I can't thank you enough for being there and for sharing, because I know that Head Start, it's all about the families, and when everybody shares knowledge, the families just grow from it.
Mhm.
So thank you very much for your time today. And thank you guys for participating in the chat, for asking your questions, for giving your take on our questions. Please know that this will be sent over to you all, and we're going to include a couple of materials to go with it. We'll include a copy of the slide scale. I've got a note to add that in there, as well as some interview information. So I will let you all get back to your day. Thank you for being with us. We greatly appreciate you all, and stay safe and just take care, y'all. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.